Your Creative Push, episode 195.
That sense that something is wrong in the world and you could do it better is a really good feeling to act on. Follow that hunch.
Welcome to Your Creative Push, the podcast that pushes you to pursue your creative passions. I'm your host, Youngmin Brown, and my guest today is Matt Kohr. Matt is a concept artist in the game industry and has worked at Motiga Games, Vicious Cycle Software, and Hi-Rez Studios. And he is also the creator of the digital painting resource Ctrl+Paint.com. Matt, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Yeah, man, of course. I was wondering if we could start out maybe before we get to Ctrl+Paint, you can kind of tell us how you came up as an artist.
Sure. Yeah, so, well, first, since I know you're not going to say it, I'd like to just say it's amazing that you put out 189 episodes in your first year. Is that right? 189?
Yeah.
I mean, I recognize your podcast is all about bringing on other people to inspire, but man, that is awesome.
Dude, thank you so much. I appreciate
unusual.
that.
Yeah.
It was stressful.
I'm sure. And I hope your audience realizes just how much work goes into that, because I know a little bit due to my website, but
right.
Yeah, that's impressive.
Yeah, a lot of time. My wife is the one that had to suffer the most, though.
I get that part, too.
But thank you. I appreciate that.
Okay, so to your question, the short version is I grew up wanting to work for Pixar as a little kid. Actually, first it was Disney, and then Pixar. Mm-hmm. And had like the laser focus on one target, which was do art all the time. And that led to going to art school and then working in the video game industry as a concept artist. But it was really, I think, a series of me being overconfident and jumping into something, kind of getting in over my head, and then like scrambling to make it work over and over and over, I realize. Because on paper, it looks really linear, like went to art school, learned how to paint dragons, got paid in the game industry to paint dragons, and now I teach other people to paint dragons. Well, I use dragons as a euphemism. I don't know that I've ever actually painted a dragon, but like, sci-fi stuff.
Yeah.
So anyway, that's like on paper, that's what it looks like. But it was such a series of like accidents and trial and error and good timing and luck and all the stuff that like you don't really hear when you look at one of your heroes' portfolios and just like see all the good stuff. So my training up to this point has all been how to paint stuff. And right now what I'm doing is running a website and making videos and like teaching all things that I was not at all trained for. So on one hand, I'm a concept artist in the game industry, and that's true, and that's what I was trained for. But in recent years, what I've really been spending my time doing is figuring out a whole bunch of stuff that has no safety net and I was not prepared for, but that has turned out to be like way more enjoyable and like rewarding than what I actually went to school for. So I don't know where that leaves us.
Yeah, well, that leads us to today, I guess. But do you think that that's good advice then for people to kind of getting in over your head and just figuring it out as you go? Or do you think more planning is necessary, especially as a visual artist creating your own stuff?
So from my experience, I've always thought I was a planner. And I plan. And I've had one really specific target that I've worked really, really hard towards. But what's always happened is like life gets in the way and I end up hitting some different target. And because I've been really focused on some goal, I've always been like learning art stuff. And then when something unexpected presents itself, I sort of have the tools to act on that. And so I think the advice I'd give is like have one really strong goal and work towards it, but don't expect to actually hit that precise thing, because like our art is so unpredictable and things are changing in the world, and it's okay if that goal changes, because whatever it changes to could also be really, really exciting.
Yeah, for sure. We talk about that a lot, is that idea of what you plan to get to, like the point that you plan to be at in a year, 2 years, 5 years, whatever it may be. Usually it's a different target, like you said, but to be kind of open and like okay with audibling whenever it deems necessary.
Yeah, and I think that could be hard for artists. I think your identity is so wrapped up in like that one word title of what you do.
Mm-hmm.
And I actually have a hard time answering, like in a party or something, when someone will ask me what I do, I tend to default saying I draw stuff for the game industry. And really, that's not true anymore. I mean, it is. I do a little freelance here and there, but mainly I teach. But I've had such a hard time identifying as a teacher that I totally get that idea of you have one vision of yourself as an artist, and it can be really hard to shake, even though kind of the world goes in a different direction sometimes.
Mm.
But I love teaching, so I don't know.
Why do you think that you have a hard time identifying as a teacher?
I think I bought into that terrible myth that is spread around that, like, if you can't do, you teach.
Mm.
You know, that like the washed out artist becomes art teacher at community college.
Mm-hmm.
And it's so not true. They are just different skills.
And skills that not everybody can have, to be able to like explain like why you're able to do something great. Like some people just can't. They're just like, well, I just do it. You know, I just make that brushstroke, or it just feels right. You know what I mean? And it's really hard to like get down. And I think that's why like people could, I've suggested this before. I'm not a visual artist at all. Like I have no skills whatsoever. So maybe I need to go to your school. But to be able to like maybe like do the, you know, record yourself drawing and then go back over it to like try to explain to yourself. Like you don't even have to put it like as like a video online to teach other people, but just almost like to teach yourself, like to be able to analyze why you did something, whether it was doing something right or doing something wrong, and kind of do like a play-by-play. And just, I think you can really learn by teaching. So to be able to kind of teach yourself as like a first step, I think is like a really good idea.
Totally. And I think even if you're not a visual artist, communication is a skill. It's one you practice. It's not something we often think about, but like just telling a story or trying to explain why your idea is like the right thing to do in this situation to your coworkers. That's all valuable stuff. At art school, I did not focus on that much. I don't know if you could really take classes in it beyond like public speaking or whatever kind of boring standard, but the pitch, storytelling, all that stuff is part of everything we do. Visual art especially, but I think all jobs. And so what I stumbled into with making Ctrl+Paint was like, I knew how to paint, and I had a lot of opinions about tutorials because I'd spent like years and years teaching myself through terrible tutorials online. So I had opinions and I had painting skills. I thought, okay, that's all I need. I can just start making videos. Well, what I've realized over the years is actually there's another ingredient in there, which is communication. And when you said that some people just can't do it, I don't think that's quite fair. I think it's a skill that you learn like any other skill. But I've had to spend like way more time than I thought I would just learning about communication to kind of make the meat of it, which is digital painting, accessible. It doesn't work. No matter how good I may be at painting, the ability to tell somebody else about that, I think, is really the important part.
Right. And also, I guess the kind of methodology and like the easiest way to approach it as well must be difficult to kind of decipher when you're trying to teach somebody how to make to draw a dragon, you know?
Right. Yeah. And that, I guess, is really where if somebody had one thought about Ctrl+Paint, I would hope their thought would be that it's organized or that it gives them some sense of structure like a traditional classroom would, because really all the 3D and 2D software I've learned over the years, I've had to teach myself for a variety of reasons. And I would say that the standard is you're like hunting through a big pile of garbage, and there are little nuggets of gold here and there. And it's all free or mostly free. So it's like, in theory, you can learn whatever you want. The challenge is figuring out what order to assemble it all into. And if you get stuck, like what happens next? And so I just did that for enough years that I thought, there's got to be a better way to, if you are a beginner and want to learn digital painting, like you type in digital painting into Google and then something happens. Like you have to spend years trying to find some sense out of this mess. So anyway, I've kind of made it my mission to make a site that isn't terrible and that is organized. So I didn't come into this with any like star power, or I hadn't worked at Blizzard or at Disney or have like sort of name recognition, and I'm not by any means like the best painter, but I have been like the most annoyed audience member. I've been that learner for so many years that what I wanted to bring to it was just the learning process itself, like the medium of digital videos on the internet, on websites. I just thought that could be improved. And the only thing I know what to talk about is digital painting, so I do that. But the structure itself, I think, is why I keep doing Ctrl+Paint, because that can always be improved.
Yeah, it's funny that you say that. It's as I listen to interview-based podcasts now, I'm just like, like I have a good sense of what I dislike. Like, I hate how this person interrupts the guest, or I hate how this person, I don't know. There's just like different things that I'm like, okay, I got to make sure I don't do that. And it's really, I think, important whenever you do have strong opinions and you can't necessarily find the thing that you want. Like you said, those kinds of tutorials didn't exist, and there wasn't a resource where it presented itself like kind of in a clean way, like in a a structured way. Create it yourself.
Yeah.
If you have that kind of a strong opinion, I think strong opinions are often a sign that you can do it yourself, that you maybe should go down this path, even if it seems difficult.
Absolutely. And I think, especially for the sort of thesis of your podcast, that's just a really important takeaway, because in retrospect, I've learned that that's called a business niche. Like if you're frustrated with something and you have a really specific vision of how it could be done differently, that means somebody's ready to pay money for it. And I didn't know that when I started making my website. It was definitely not like a business that I had in mind. It has turned into a business, but that sense that something is wrong in the world and you could do it better is a really good feeling to act on, because you've got the taste, definitely. And you might have some of the skills you need to act on it. Follow that hunch. Like that's another time where I sort of jumped in over my head. I had the right idea, which was beginners need a simpler way to learn digital painting. And I had some of the details correct. Like they generally don't want to watch long videos, and they don't want to pay much money or can't pay much money. But what I didn't have was any of the technical skills. Like I started making videos in a way that I am so embarrassed by now when I look back at the old ones, as I'm sure you can attest to just in your own year of like honing your craft. It starts out rough, It sucks looking back. But what happens along the way is your need to fix the problem will just trump any of the like little technical problems. So I now know how to edit video, and I know how to record audio better. And the technical stuff that if I'd really thought about it at the time would have just paralyzed me. I would have seen a list, an expensive long list of things I had to buy and learn before I could actually make the video I had in my mind. If I had really thought about that realistically, I would not have made the website.
Right.
But I jumped in and I thought, you know what? I'm making those videos. And then, one little piece at a time, I like learned about a new piece of software or got a better microphone or whatever. It didn't happen all at once.
Yeah, it's those small upgrades along the way as you kind of realize. You're right. And I think that's what does kind of stop people, is that knowledge, because there's so many resources out there to kind of to help you along the way, whatever it may be, that can just stop you in your tracks because you see all the things that you might need to buy, all the certain skills that you have. Like if somebody goes to Ctrl+Paint and they see how many videos do you have? You have like over 100 free ones, right?
I think I'm nearing 400 free ones, actually.
Holy shit.
Yeah.
Well,
a bunch.
Yeah. So if somebody goes there and they're like, okay, I need to watch all these videos in order to become an artist, they might stop in their tracks. So it's so important to kind of chunk it down and just look at that first video and take it one step at a time. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I do. I mean, I know all too well what you mean, because that general sense of make a big problem less scary by turning it into small, manageable problems is kind of the approach I take with Ctrl+Paint, because learning to paint is a big, scary problem. And I think if you're a beginner, especially, it's like, it's so overwhelming. Why even start is the kind of common feeling about it. And so I set out to make videos specifically for beginners. There's a lot of tutorials online, as I'm sure your audience knows. Like, there's no shortage of speed painting videos on YouTube. But I think that the beginner is in the most danger. Like, if you're an intermediate artist, getting to become a advanced artist is sort of an understood path. If you're a beginner, nothing is obvious. And so I have dedicated lots and lots of time, like, again, almost 6 years at this point with Ctrl+Paint, to just figuring out what does that beginner need. And if someone like feels so accomplished at digital painting that my site is no longer useful to them, that's like, I've done the best job I could possibly do, and send them to some more advanced website that's already out there. I have no need to make advanced training stuff, because so many people do that, which is really hard, because, you know, I've been painting long enough that I don't spend my time personally thinking about like still life painting and drawing circles and the things that beginners need to do. But for the website, that's what I have to focus on. So it's an interesting exercise kind of personally as well.
Yeah, that is interesting. Do you think that's, you mentioned in the beginning about how Ctrl+Paint has given you much more satisfaction than working for somebody else. I assume that it's because you're creating something for yourself. I don't want to put words in your mouth, but I assume that that's part of the satisfaction. But also, is it because you are actively solving that problem, that frustration that you had before?
Yes, that feeling is a good one. And it's one you never really solve the problem, is the sad reality. Like, I set out 6 years ago to make what I thought was going to be literally 1 hour of content. Like, I in my mind, it was, okay, they're beginners. They need to know how to make digital painting. It's like an hour, maybe an hour and a half. And so that was like what the problem seemed to me at the time. And now I don't even know if you put all my videos in a line, what they would add up to, but a lot. And I feel like I'm further away now from solving the beginner painting problem than when I started. But that's not bad. Like, to answer your question, which was, is it satisfying to keep solving that problem? And absolutely. Like, I spent at Motiga, I think, just about a year. Really, really fun co-workers. We were working on an online game that's really stylized and like beautiful art that I was designing for the environments. But we spent a year, and I think I worked on like one big level that went through a lot of revisions. And so at the end of the day, that's like, you know, a year of my life on something that, I don't know, I was one small gear in a big machine, and a lot of people are going to have fun playing the game, but it's not like I really made an impact, I guess. I didn't really solve any problems with that. With Ctrl+Paint, every week I'm like trying to break down some tiny little bite-sized part of this scary problem and solve it, and then like solve it in a way where someone wants to come back and watch another video. So just the stakes are a little different, I guess.
Yeah, absolutely. It's that feeling of, well, I get that all the time. I'm a poker dealer. For people that don't know, that's my full-time gig. But I would imagine it's a little bit different with working for Motiga, but you kind of feel like a cog in the machine as opposed to this thing that you've kind of taken control of, especially something that might, to a normal person, like creating a podcast about getting past creative blocks. Like, they're like, okay. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But it's a problem that I think a lot of people desperately have. And not everybody, a very small percentage of the overall population. But it's this thing that is my own. It's this thing that I'm doing on my own. It's this thing that I have complete control over, that I've brought into the universe, as opposed to dealing cards to somebody, or for you, you know, being one piece of one level of a game. You know what I mean?
I do. And I really like your podcast because you've picked one very specific challenge to solve, which is you want to get people kind of motivated to take that leap. And the way you approach that challenge is like different every episode. You're interviewing people from all sort of different creative avenues, but the commonality, though, is really consistent. And I think there's so much noise on the internet. There's so many like different like Twitch streamers who you can watch for 24 hours a day playing video games, and like people who have become celebrities on YouTube, all these different things that are these media experiments. What I see less of is what you're doing, which is to have a really, really specific aim and to execute on that over and over, and to not have extra stuff, no fluff. So good job on that.
Thank you, man. You're gonna make me cry.
No, but I watch a lot of YouTube. I study it almost as a part of my job. It's like, what do the kids like these days? I don't understand it. I just see such a kind of a low effort, but lots of output happening online these days. It's like people want the longest video possible or the cheapest video possible or whatever, but I see so little editing and like selection of like what you're even trying to say. And so I'm really, really happy whenever I see somebody who has an obvious thesis and they focus on that. And I think your audience might have some really cool idea that they're like worried about, I don't know how they're going to monetize it or how many like Twitter followers they're going to have, when what I think really separates the good from the bad is that core idea, that like problem that you want to solve in the world. And if you just keep like write it on your desktop and just keep looking at it and think with every incremental little decision you make stylistically or otherwise, like, am I getting back to that original thesis? If you can kind of stay on that target, I think it's hard to lose.
Yeah, it's impossible not to progress in one way. And like you said, the target might be a little bit different, a little bit off, but as long as you have that core idea, that thesis, that thing that you're striving for every day, you're gonna at least go somewhere good, somewhere towards that, whether it's like to the left or to the right or up or down. That's to be determined. But if you think about all the different directions you could go on your way to that left, right, up or down, you might drive yourself insane, and you also might just stop going forward at all.
Yeah. And if it's anything that needs an audience, this creative project you've got brewing, if it's something that you would hope people would continue to show up for, I think having a clear thesis becomes even more important. That like some people seem to get by on general likability or celebrity or whatever, but the internet is so searchable and everything is like one click away from everything else, that I think having something very clear, like a clear point of view that someone can tell immediately, is what really matters. That if you just make a show because you want to make a show and it's like all over the place and has no focus, I think that's just a recipe for someone to change a channel.
Absolutely. This podcaster this podcast used to exist that I listened to. I won't name names, but it was all about podcasting. And I loved the host. Like, he was awesome. He was a nice guy. And then they stopped that podcast and he started his own podcast. And it's exactly like you said. It's like, it's not necessarily about him, but it doesn't follow any type of like thesis. It doesn't have like a goal. You know what I mean? It doesn't have, he just talks about whatever. And I stopped. I unsubscribed. I was like, I can't, like, I love him, but I don't know, like, it's not interesting enough to captivate me like that,
Yeah. Well, think about, how did you find him in the first place? Not because he was a likable guy.
Looking for that thing. Right.
Yeah. If you're a likable guy or girl or whatever, I think that is like, that's bonus. That's part of your communication. But if you don't have the message in the first place, that's it. Now, I guess there are exceptions. Like, I watch PewDiePie. I used to on YouTube.
I love him.
Yeah, I've kind of
done with him.
I'm done with him, but I don't want to get into the reasons. But I think I watched him originally because he was a phenomenon. So at some level, once you had a thesis originally and then you became widely known, at that point you probably can just work on inertia alone. But he, I think, started because he had some noteworthy something that he did consistently every episode. Now he's a maniac, but
yeah, he is a maniac. It's interesting because I actually only I heard about him like only a year ago, and I heard about him a couple times. I was like, all right, let me check this guy out because he has so many more YouTube followers than anybody,
right,
like by far. So I was like, okay, like, let me check it out. And I've been watching some videos, but it's interesting to see his influence. He had like this video about forced positivity on YouTube the other, this was like,
I watched
probably
that.
a month ago or so. Yeah. And I noticed all the other not podcasters, all the other YouTubers that I follow all talked about that. they all like talked about that in their own way. And it's really interesting to see that kind of an influence. Like he says something like, this is an issue, or before it was like he had issues with YouTube not like sharing his stuff. And I see all these other YouTubers talking about it in their own way. It's so interesting to see what kind of a impact somebody like that, somebody that has so many followers, can have.
Yeah, it's wild. And I guess I've spent a lot of time being like jealous of, if not PewDiePie specifically, just people that have 1 million followers or just a huge audience. But I guess if your listeners right now are thinking like, oh gosh, I have 0 followers. I have this big project I want to do, but like I'll never reach that level. What I would give as a counterpoint is that the audience on Ctrl+Paint is relatively small. In almost any measurable internet metric, I'm like a blip that you could not sell ads on my website. But that doesn't matter because I decided right away, right when I started the site, that I was going to have a bunch of free stuff that had no ads and also some very affordable $10 videos if you were really interested, like if you'd watch the free things and you wanted to learn more. And that was kind of a guess, like maybe it will work. Maybe enough people will buy them that I won't need a huge audience to sell ads to. And it's worked way better than I ever would have guessed.
Yeah.
So if you have a small audience that is dedicated to whatever you're putting out into the world, you can totally make it work financially. You're going to have to get creative, and you're not going to be able to listen to the common wisdom, which is like get a giant newsletter and make sales and do like ad revenue and et cetera, et cetera. You're going to have to figure out what exactly you're able to sell them or what they are going to find valuable. But yeah, I can tell you just in like proportional value, one of my subscribers is, or one of my whatever, just free video watchers is worth like 1,000 of PewDiePie's.
No, for sure. And that goes along with kind of being your initial frustrations with what was out there. And I'm sure that's why you don't have ads, right?
Yeah, it was. I personally spend money and time to avoid advertising in my personal life. Like if I can ever pay to remove ads from something, I will. I don't have TV, et cetera. So that was just like, I hate ads. I'm not going to add more to the internet. If the site doesn't work without ads, well, then the site's not going to work. And so it's never had ads. And it turns out it worked anyway. But I see this like scramble for the biggest audience as like just lowering your standards. Everybody's like trying to figure out how they can reach the lowest common denominator giant audience because they need that for the ad revenue. And I think it just hurts content. It's like you watch stuff on YouTube that's clearly just struggling for views. And there's just not enough time in the day.
I think you're right. And I think a lot of people do worry about the numbers. They might be scared to put something out there when they don't have a big audience, but having a kind of a loyal audience is so much more important. Like you said, one of your followers or one of your users is 1,000 times more valuable than one of PewDiePie, or however you said it.
Probably. I mean, so just like I have 5,000 views a day is my kind of running average. I've been doing this site for 6 years, or there are 5,000 video plays a day, which in internet terms is nothing. Like big YouTubers will put out a video and it'll get 5,000 views in the first 2 minutes. And yet this is my full-time job. I'm making more than I did at game studios. Like it definitely works if you're willing to trust in what you're doing and to not like bend to the kind of the consumer norms, I guess, the things that seem obvious and that seem like everybody's doing. And that's the only way to do it. If you have something really interesting and the audience can kind of like feels like you're really adding value to their lives, they'll pay for it.
I also think that people could be scared of that too, of just building a small following and not seeing it happen right away. But I do think that, and this kind of goes along with what we were talking about before, that if you put out stuff that comes from your heart, if you put out stuff that has come from frustrations that you've had and things that you truly believe in, to just keep doing that, and an audience will eventually find you. And I think that some people, when they get negative feedback or things aren't working quite right, they try to change what they're doing and get away from that big thesis that we were talking about before, and they stray from that and they go towards kind of a different goal to appease those people who aren't really interested in their stuff anyway and probably aren't listening or watching anymore anyway because they left. Maybe they left a nasty comment and said this sucks or whatever, and they went on their way, and then you change what you're doing to appease to those people who really aren't part of that core thesis that you have. And I think it's just a matter of time. Enough people will eventually find you that are totally locked in and loyal to what you're doing if you kind of have that thesis and you're going towards that thesis.
Yeah, I agree 100%. And it's really interesting. We used to make products in a world where if you had a big company, you could afford to do focus testing, and then you would get like essentially professional audience members to tell you a review of your product, and then you would make, you'd change the product a little bit and then release it. Now everybody has access to their own focus testing all the time, and in real time are seeing like, thumbs up and likes and comments, etc., on everything they're publishing constantly. And I think there's this danger of falling into that positive feedback loop of only listening to the crowd. And like, if I only listen to the crowd I've chosen are beginner digital painters. And if the question I ask a beginner is, what do you want to learn next? They tell me the wrong answer every time because they're beginners. They don't know. Like, they're coming to me because I know more than they do. That's the deal. So if I were to listen to what they had to say too much, I would give up my authority as the teacher, and then I would just be like an entertainer, I guess. And so some things are really valuable about this feedback that we can get generally for free, but it's also really dangerous. So be careful sacrificing your gut, I guess, or like, in the case of computers, it was Steve Jobs just did whatever he wanted and the market followed. And like Microsoft would listen to focus groups, and clearly the Steve Jobs method has some credibility. I'm not the Steve Jobs, but like, I think there really is something to having a vision and sticking to it and not overly relying on the sort of popular feedback immediately.
For sure. Yeah, I just released a survey that people have been filling out. Some of the things that are coming back, like there's some suggestions, and I think it's really important sometimes to do that because there's some things that I'm like, oh, I had no idea that this was a problem, or oh, I had no idea that this was happening. And so it's important to get that kind of a feedback. But then there's some things that came back that I'm like, no, I'm not going to change that because that again goes against kind of my personal identity or that thesis of what I'm talking about, in the show.
That's awesome.
So it's important it's a hard line sometimes to walk, to know what to listen to, but I guess every feedback that comes back, you got to kind of listen to it and take it for what it is, and then either change it or move on. But to know what to do, it, I guess, takes practice and also like a clear vision on that thesis.
It does. But if you're just starting out, I think it's probably easy to default to publish something, see how many likes it gets, and then immediately decide whether it was a terrible idea or not. Mainly you didn't get enough likes, so it's a terrible idea. Don't do that. Trust yourself. It'll take a little while for people to kind of to get up to speed with it because it's so easy. Like to kind of pull this back to my personal work for a minute. I have been mainly doing Ctrl+Paint for a while, and I've not been doing much personal painting. But just 2 days ago, I finally put my recent work up on an ArtStation page, which is like a portfolio page for game industry stuff. And all of a sudden I found myself falling into that trap of like, how many page views did it get? How many likes did it get? Oh, how many followers do I have now? What about now? And that is so toxic. It doesn't do us any good at all. It's important to be aware of what your contemporaries are up to, but you cannot live and die on like hitting refresh all day long and trying to like see if you're valuable or not based on how many people have clicked that like button. But go to my page and click my like button. No, I'm kidding.
Yeah, we'll have that linked up to go.
That was absolutely not what I was going for. It was actually, so I was going to keep that work hidden. I've started a sort of a new direction for my personal work. And I was going to almost go like a whole year and then put out this huge dump of like, it's finally finished. And then I've been listening to your show enough, and everybody's message is like, nah, just get out there. Just publish it now. I'm like, fine. So I've published my work. It's going to be a much more transparent process of me kind of going through this new chapter. So I'm taking the advice, I guess. We'll see how it goes. It's worked for me in the past, but I've gotten lazy recently.
Well, good, man. I'm glad. I'm glad you're listening. So then what is that kind of direction that you're going in, and what are some of the hesitancies that you've had to, like you said, you wanted to wait like a year? Like why was that?
Well, I am not job hunting. I'm making my living running the website, but at some point I'd like to go back into working in a game studio and doing concept art full time. So I know there's going to be some tipping point where I have to start impressing people again. And at that point, I need to have a new portfolio ready to go. In this case, I'm sort of getting more into not just architecture. Traditionally, I've been a environment concept artist, which is like, technically, I'm not allowed to draw dragons. I can only draw the mountain that they sit on.
Right.
And within that world, I've started recently getting really interested in interiors, and there's actually not as many people doing like interior architecture, and lots of people drawing sweeping vistas, not so many people drawing like the inside of the break room. But I really like it. It's called interior design in the non-video game world, and in the video game world, I don't know that it has a name, but so I've been sort of refocusing myself on interior spaces, that imagining them and then painting them digitally. And as a result, I'm not very good at it yet, and I have tons to learn, which is fun, but doing it publicly is scary. And I think probably I would have waited a little longer to go publicly with it, but why not?
Why not? Well,
why not?
Yeah, like it goes with the whole kind of theme of what we're talking about and the show and what you do. It's, putting yourself out there, see what happens, and trying to not look at the likes too much and let that affect kind of what you do. Yeah.
Because I know a year from now, I'll have made a lot more and they'll be better and I'll be on my way. But the beginnings are always hard.
Absolutely. Now, are there some problems or some struggles that you deal with I guess, the day-to-day with Ctrl+Paint as far as like putting content out and like getting because it is, work. And it's, I know all too well, like the behind the scenes of putting, a podcast together, just audio or a video or, getting all of that kind of busy work done. Do you have any kind of day-to-day struggles with that?
Luckily, I gave myself some external accountability right at the beginning. Like initially it was gosh, this is bad. I should know this. It was either 2 or 3 per week, free videos that I released. I think it's actually 2. I'm now down to 1 a week, but still every Thursday I release a free video. And so I think having that external structure has just become part of my life. And I don't have trouble getting those videos finished just because I know it has to happen. The other part, which are the paid videos I make, don't really have that schedule. And so that kind of ebbs and flows in terms of like these 2 last big products I put out, sort of like 6 packs of my $10 videos, all new content. The first one was about 3D, using 3D art in your 2D paintings. And that took me, I think, 7 months to make. The one that followed that was about color. And so it was, much more traditional. And the color one, same length, took 6 weeks, I think, 5 weeks. Way different. 7 months versus 1 month. So clearly I have very little ability to plan if that's kind of the way my work goes. It can be a mental battle day to day when you're like 6 months in on a project that no one has seen yet. And it's a huge gamble for you. And just like, you have to keep working on it. And by default, you're not going to get any external feedback. Yeah, it's terrifying. But I think giving myself something public, external, that's routine, in my case, Thursday free videos, has been a lifesaver. It's just kept me going in a way that's now become automatic.
Yeah, that's the same for me. Like I get the podcast done, but nothing else because I don't have that accountability anymore. I haven't updated my blog in like a year. I haven't made a music video in a year. So it is important to have that. I need to start setting deadlines for that because it's almost like magic. It's like you can really find the time because you have to find the time.
Yeah. I mean, I'm amazed at how many videos you've put out, or podcasts. I mean, I know you work at night, right?
Yep. Yeah.
So what is your, like, when do you wake up in the morning? How do you physically do it?
So usually I wake up if there's a interview that works out for people, but otherwise, I usually wake up around noon, and then I leave for work at 5 p.m. I get to work at, like 5:30. I work from 6 to 2. I get home at like around 3 a.m. And then if there's that's when I do interviews with people from the other side of the world.
Wow.
So that works out nicely for that. But other than that, yeah, then I stay up till usually like 5 or 6 a.m. Either editing, getting whatever I have to get done, and then go to sleep and rinse and repeat. And then weekends I fill in the gaps too.
So those episodes I've listened to, some of those were after a long shift in the middle of the night, talking to somebody across the world.
Yeah, most of the ones with people from either Australia or Singapore, anywhere over there, Ireland. Yeah, that's after a long shift, and usually my voice is kind of hoarse, but at the same time though, like the whole shift I was thinking about how excited I was to get back and do that, and usually I am excited to go, like, get home from my job to like work on this, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it's okay. And I think whenever you do have that passion for something that you're really like stoked about, and you kind of get in a pattern of doing it every day, and that's why like I always stress like doing it every day and having those self-imposed deadlines, it's a good like recipe to be able to do it, to be able to find the time.
Well, then I think you are the inspirational one for this episode, because when I was my first year of Ctrl+Paint, it was not quite as bad as your schedule, because at least it wasn't in the middle of the night, but it was like more work than I really should have been doing. It was, I hate the word hustle, but it was like I was spending all my time making new videos and like making the website and getting the audience going and all that. Now that it's established, my schedule is like a normal person's schedule. I probably work 35 hours a week, maybe 40. It's a kind of a normal job. And so the beginning of everything, I think, has to feel that way. It's just like, it's the only way you're going to put this thing into the world is if you work double time on it and make it fit into the gaps. I did that. And like, luckily it's been long enough now that I'm not actively scarred from it anymore. But at some point, I imagine you're going to have to settle your schedule down a little bit.
Well, I mean, I did like the first 100 episodes was 5 days a week. So it was every weekday. And now I don't need, like, thinking back at it, like, I'm like, how did I do that? Like, cause now I don't know. I think, yeah, I don't know. I guess I had a little bit of a head start, but things settle down, you know, like you kind of find what's comfortable for you and what you can do, and also what works with your family, you know, what works with, you know, your wife. And for me, that was a struggle for the first, 100 episodes, the first like 6 months, and we knew that going in that it was going to be like a huge time devotion. But I don't know. It's one of those things like we were talking about before, not knowing like how much time it's going to be and all the extra time that you didn't plan for. That ignorance is bliss mentality is a really good thing to do, and to kind of hit the ground running and just get into it, as fast as you can, whatever it is, and then figure it out as you go. Figure out the things that you need to change. The other thing is like, it's hard starting something, for sure. We've talked about that. And it was really hard to like book guests, get people interested in this like idea, essentially, this thing that didn't exist yet. But now that it's like established and there's people on board, we have, almost 200 episodes now, and I could reach out to somebody like you and be like, here, look at this. Would you like to be a part of this? As opposed to like really having to explain it. I think that there's a lot of power in having kind of not a brand, but having
a brand,
a body of work that you can show people,
Yeah. And I think that it's always hard starting out. Like, it's not weird for you, audience member, if you feel like there's this resistance working against you when you're starting, because I think most of the stories you hear and interviews like this one are from people who are not in the starting phase, probably being interviewed because they've already put out some stuff into the world. And if that's all you ever hear, it can feel like you're doing something wrong when you're not getting the right feedback, and it's hard, and you're working like twice as long for half the reward, or even worse. Like, I was working 4 times as long for a quarter of the reward. That's just the way it goes, I think. Unless you're like super lucky and you get some stars aligning. That's how the beginning is.
Yeah, the beginning is the toughest. Those steps are so tough sometimes, especially when it seems like you're taking those steps and not getting anywhere. That's why it's so important to love what you do and love kind of that thesis, that mission that you're going towards, because you have to really love it, because you're going to start to not love it, you know what I mean? Or even start to loathe it or hate it. And that there's just no point at that point. So just like, it's so important to really believe in what you're doing. And like you said, to have that, you know, that one sentence of this is the thing I'm working for, and to continue to like always look at that and always like kind of cherish that and remember that memory of why you're doing it in the first place. Yeah.
Because I think it's become like popular folklore that you can just make a podcast to make some passive income. Like, doesn't really matter what it's about. Make a YouTube channel, you'll find yourself a little bit richer. That's not true. That's so not true. It's like the people that have made that work had something they cared about. And oh, by the way, it happened to be on YouTube or a Patreon or whatever. Just like, oh, just join in. You'll probably make some money. That does not work.
Yeah, not at all. Dude. We have to do the final push, man. And this is where I ask you to reach to the microphone and grab the shoulder of one of the listeners that you've already really inspired today. And I'm sure there's many. And just give them your best words of advice and really push them to pursue their creative passions.
Okay. Talking to you now. I know there's something you want to do. And I also know that it's really hard, or it looks maybe impossible. What I would say is you should just go jump in and do it, even though you don't have all the pieces lined up yet, because you never will. So jump out there, get in over your head, and then you're going to have to scramble to learn all the stuff. But all that stuff will just fall into place. But the getting started part is the really scary, but ultimately crucial thing to do.
It's the hardest thing to do, to spring into action. But it's so important. And once you do it, I think you will be a happier person no matter what. Even if it's realizing that this thing isn't for you. Like, I think it's so important, because then you can check it off of your list and it won't be like this constant like regret.
Yeah. I mean, that's a whole nother podcast, but I've got a number of those, that some public, some not, that were just, I tried it, didn't work, checked off the list, and I don't have to think about it anymore.
Well, we'll get you on again to talk about all of those regrets.
Perfect.
Or non-regrets. You can find Matt on his website, which is mattkohr.com, mattkohr.com, but head to Ctrl+Paint.com. That's CTRL paint.com. We'll have everything linked up at the show notes page at yourcreativepush.com/mattkohr. And check it out, because I think, you know, there's nothing better than free. And I think that this is quality free stuff. You know what I mean? Like, you can't find that really anywhere else.
Well, hey, thanks, Youngman. I had a blast.
My thanks again to Matt for coming on the show. I had so much fun talking with him. And guys, you know that I go back and listen through the episode again to edit it for you and make show notes and all that stuff. And yes, I do realize how many times I brought up that point, you know, that central thesis and having one. Matt said it first and I kind of stole it from him, but that's because it's so damn true. It's so important to have that central thing, that end goal that you really want to get to. And if you have that main goal every day, if you work towards it, you can't go wrong. And at Ctrl+Paint, Matt works with beginners, and we talked a lot about starting out. And that's why it's so important to have that central thesis, to have that thing that you go towards. Because in the beginning, it's so hard to get that momentum when you feel like it's just you kind of yelling out into the middle of like a desert and there's nobody around. It can be very, very demoralizing. And especially when your only metric of success is the number of likes that you get. And like Matt said, that's a really dangerous thing to measure your success by. The thing you should be measuring your success by is, are you following that ultimate goal that you have for yourself? It will take a long time for people to catch on, but the right people will catch on. So just be patient. Just keep going forward towards that ultimate goal, and I think you'll be much happier. And a good way to kind of trick yourself to be able to ignore the maybe lack of supporters or followers that you have is to, like Matt said, just jump in over your head, and you'll be so, I don't want to say overwhelmed, but you'll have so much to do to figure out how to get to where you want to be that the lack of audience might not seem as big of a deal, because you're still figuring all these things out for yourself, and you might not even want an audience at that point while you're still figuring it out. If you kind of dip your toes in and kind of test it out a little bit, for some people that might be a better method, but for others that might really show you how much work is involved to getting to that ultimate goal, and it might add to the excuses for you to stop. And that is not what we want you to do. But that is all I've got for you today. Hopefully you were inspired to go and get your work done. So go and get it done, and we will see you on Thursday with Nicolas Uribe. Nicolas is a really awesome artist from Bogota. We had an awesome conversation about art, creativity, and pushing past various creative blocks that you might have. And you can find his art at nicolasuribeart.com. That's NicolasUribeart.com. And on Instagram, he is Nicolas Uribe. That's with a B at the end. And we'll have all that linked up at the show notes page today at yourcreativepush.com/195. But until then, go and get some amazing work done. I love you all, and we will see you next time. Bye. Never miss a push. Head to yourcreativepush.com/subscribe to find the easiest way for you to subscribe to the podcast.